St. Paul's Church was established in 1749, more than 25 years before the signing of the Declaration of Independence. I want you to take a minute and just close your eyes and imagine what Augusta looked like back then. A very small town, towering trees, a great flowing river, and a tiny church on the corner of what was known then as Fort Augusta.
I think what stands out to me from the history of St. Paul's is the long devotion from generation to generation.
St. Paul's Church has a fascinating history. It has survived a lot, including several wars and the Great Augusta Fire of 1916. It's had 5 buildings since it began. The colonial church was the first. Historian Eric Montgomery says when Augusta was founded in 1735, settlers conducted their own prayer services. Finally, they decided they needed a real church.
But they started bringing wives and having children, and they thought that there needed to be a more civilizing influence in a wild and woolly. This was the wild, wild west. 2
years after settlers requested a priest, Father Jonathan Copp arrived. When he got to Augusta, he brought a gift from the Church of England, a marble baptismal font that is still displayed at the church today. Montgomery says Copp was not a fan of the settlement and left 5 years after arriving.
Jonathan Copp hated Augusta with a passion because he was not used to the wild and woolly areas. He thought he was going to be killed at any minute, either by the Indians or by the settlers, one or the other.
The colonial church house was destroyed by refugee vandals in 1762. A new building was put up in 1764, but was destroyed during the American Revolution in 1781. In 1789, a third church building was constructed and was used until 1819.
When that building was moved over to Broad Street, and converted into a store, and they built the brick church that we call the 1820 church on the site.
The brick building stood until March of 1916 when it was destroyed by the Great Fire of Augusta. One story about the fire is the bell being rung until the fire consumed it.
The sexton was ringing the bell on the rope, pulling the rope, hoping that people would come to help and try to save the church. And so finally the rope burned off, and so the bell stopped, and then shortly after that the bell tower caved in, and it just caved into the church, and it was just all over.
Before the church building caught fire, they held a service to pray the fire wouldn't reach them. When it became apparent it would, they began to take important items out. The church's rector, Father Eric Biddy, says the quick thinking of the people of the church is the reason they have some of the artifacts they have today.
There are stories of members and the priest running into the burning church to save the holy things, to get out as much stuff as they could.
The church grounds are home to the oldest cemetery in Augusta, with graves that date back to the 1730s. Many people of note are buried there, including Colonel Ambrose Gordon, grandfather of Juliet Gordon Lowe, the founder of the Girl Scouts. The remains of Colonel William Few, one of Georgia's signers of the Constitution, reside at St. Paul's. Perhaps most interesting, the remains of a man named Robert Forsyth.
The one on my left is Robert Forsyth, who was a federal marshal, and he was the first federal marshal that was killed in the line of duty in the United States.
An urban legend is also associated with one of the graves in the churchyard.
The myth about this was that there was an Indian chief buried here on his horse, sitting up on his horse under this stone, and that was, school children love to come and see that.
Any idea how that rumor got started?
No telling. I have to dispel a lot of rumors in Augusta's history that I don't always know how they got started, but I don't know about that one. It just sounded like a good story, and somebody just made it up to entertain their children, probably.
The grave actually belongs to Joseph Ashton, a mason, firemaster, and tavern keeper. Judge Ashley Wright grew up in this church. She says she has very fond memories of her childhood there.
We used to take pennies out and put them on the train tracks when we got done at the end of the time, and we would climb over the levee and slide down to the river and get dirty and get in trouble.
There was recent conflict in the church about some of its Confederate history, but Wright says there's one thing that is helping them move past it.
That the people here are all trying to live according to God's will and God's word, and that none of us are perfect. And that we might have made some mistakes in the past, but we are here to try to do better each and every day.
I had one really important question for both Montgomery and Wright.
Are there any ghosts?
You know, I do historic preservation, and I've been in millions of, not millions, but thousands of historic buildings, and I never see a ghost. I don't know. Some people say they see ghosts.
Do you guys have any ghosts?
I wish we did. I don't know of any, but I wish that we did. I think that that would be very interesting, and I think that it would hopefully be a good spirit.
With all that history, you would think there would be ghost stories. And there's so much more to learn about St. Paul's history. They have a walking tour and a full timeline on their website. You can find that link in the article below. Hey, Augusta, that's just part of your hometown history. In Augusta, Kim Vickers, WJBF News Channel 6.